Talkin Cougars is brought to you by Safeway. Come see what's fresh.
Welcome into Talkin Cougars. I'm former Washington State quarterback Alex Brink, joined by my guy and my wide receiver, Michael Bumpus, number 5. Bump, the Cougs hit a skid at the end of the season, and nothing changed on Saturday against Wyoming. Cougs lost 15-14, one of their worst offensive outputs of the year. Couldn't have come at a worse time when the defense kind of found something. Defensive line showed up. They forced a ton of turnovers, but that offense just absolutely could not get on track.
No, they couldn't, man. It was rough. It was the slowest, I guess, game offensively that we've seen all year, honestly. It's either one or the other. Either we're seeing Mateer light the scoreboard up through the air, or we're seeing him do it with his feet. You get the running backs involved as well. Just nothing really got going, man. It started off actually kind of decent. You felt good about what they were doing, but you just hit a roadblock, and it felt like you just kept running into the same thing over and over and over again. This was a tough one, man. 3-game skid to finish the season. Not what you wanted from these guys. They do have a bowl game. You did win 8 games this year, so there are some positives to come from this, but just to end it like this is rough, man.
Yeah, I totally agree, and you're right about the way the game started. You know, they score 14 points in the first half. John Mateer fumbles right before halftime, which then allowed Wyoming to go down and kick a field goal to cut it to 14-6, and kind of felt like Wyoming got some momentum there. Cougs got the ball at a half, and you thought maybe if they put a drive together, they could start to lengthen that lead out and get some more momentum in their favor, but they go 3 and out right away, and it just felt like from that point on, Wyoming dictated the football game. And I don't even know if it was so much of what, the Cowboys did. It felt like Washington State's offense was shooting themselves in the foot, both with play calling and execution. 0 points in the second half, and really in the end, that was the key because the defense did end up forcing some turnovers. So all that being said, we got to talk about some MVPs and some guys that did play well on both sides of the ball. Bump, who did you like on offense?
On offense, I got to go Kyle Williams. He had 4 receptions for 59 yards, 1 touchdown, but didn't get any targets in the second half until late. And that makes you scratch your head a bit. He's one of the more explosive wide receivers in the country, hands down. We're going to see him in some camp on Sundays here pretty soon. But yeah, that baffled me a little bit. You throw a screen to him early in the game, he takes it to the house, you're feeling good, and you think you're going to get back to that, but you never really got back to it. So I'm giving him the award because you have to give it to somebody, and it's more out of neglect. I felt like my man was neglected. There's no way this young man should not have a target in the second half until you get to those Hail Marys and desperate situations. If I have to give it to someone, I'm going with Kyle Williams. Who you going with?
Dude, I tell you what, I'm shaking my head a little bit at that stat about targets for Kyle Williams. He has 2 targets in the second half, and they come on those Hail Marys at the end of the game. Like you say, he takes a screen pass to the house, and then he doesn't touch the football. Like, it was unbelievable. I'm on the broadcast, and I was completely stunned, Bump, in all honesty, because this is a guy that scored back-to-back 3-touchdown games. Then against Oregon State, he does the same thing, takes a smoke screen to the house. And then he does it again in the first quarter against Wyoming. My man's got to have 10-plus touches in the game. He's so explosive. How can you just figure out how to get him the ball? That's all that matters, right? And Ben Aubergle couldn't figure out how to get him the ball, and I think that was a huge factor. There's no doubt about it. My offensive MVP, and to your point, it's a little bit out of neglect. It's a little bit about kind of who the ball goes through. It is John Mateer, because without John Mateer on the field, Washington State probably doesn't stand a chance most of the season. I don't particularly think he had his best game this week. He had the fumble before half, and then he had a couple plays when he was scrambling where he probably should have gotten upfield, could have gotten a first down, and he didn't. All that being said, he has a touchdown passing. He has a touchdown rushing. He did a ton of things scrambling, and we know just how dynamic he can be. I think, again, John Mateer's the MVP. I so badly wanted Wayshawn Parker to be the MVP. They started to commit to him running the football, right? And then again, they go away from it. And then late in the game, they want to commit to it again, and on their last series, the last real series with about 5 minutes left, he rips off a couple runs, and you're like, oh man, Wayshawn's going to go. Wayshawn's going to be the guy. And then on 3rd and 3, Bump, inexplicably, Cougs drop back and pass instead of hand it off to him. And to me, again, inexcusable in that situation when your running back has got some flow to him. And so, again, what I wanted to see was number 21 busting some big runs. Unfortunately, he didn't get that opportunity. John Mateer by default. The defense bump, though, they had a day. And for a group that for 2 weeks in a row, right, people were calling for their heads and blaming them and all these things, that unit came to play. They had 6 sacks on the day. They forced, I think, 3 turnovers. I mean, it was one of their better defensive performances of the year.
It was, and that's coming off a couple of weeks where you allow 360 yards on the ground against New Mexico, a $180 against Oregon State, and then they do something that they typically don't do, throw the football there in Corvallis. So they needed a game like this, and they showed up big, man. When you hold a team to 15 points, you probably should win that ball game. If you walk into any football game on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and the football god said, you're going to hold them to 15 points, you're thinking, we're probably going to win this ball game. I mean, that just didn't happen for these guys. They played a decent game. I got to go with Buddha. I mean, 2 fumble recoveries. He's everywhere. I think if there's any bright spot on this defense the past several weeks, it's Buddha. He's making the plays. He's always around the football. And for some reason, that's what good football players do. You just get gifted a fumble recovery every now and then because you're where you're supposed to be and you are rallying to the football. I've been really impressed with the way he's been playing. Despite the struggles that the defense have had some of these weeks throughout the year, Buddha continues to shine and show up.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You mentioned the ball finds you when you play hard and you show up in the right spot. And you talked about his 2 fumble recoveries. There was an interception on the night. That's 3 turnovers, Bump. 0 points off those turnovers. That is a recipe for disaster for sure. My MVP goes to pretty much the whole defensive line. They played one of their best games. Between that group, they had 5 sacks themselves. Khalil Laufau had 2. Ansel Dimbu had 1.5. And my favorite, senior Quinn Roth, had 1.5 and a forced fumble on senior night. Man, that guy has been through it. He's battled injuries his whole career. You thought he was going to kind of be the next Brennan Jackson, RJ Stone. He was the backup for them all the way through and just could never quite get healthy. But boy, is he a true Coug. He worked hard. He was in it the whole way. It was fun on senior night to see him, again, get in the mix with a 1.5 sacks and then have that forced fumble. A forced fumble, which Buddha recovered and probably should have. And when it gave Washington State field position about midfield, that was a moment where I thought the Cougs were going to get and take advantage, and they just couldn't get that momentum back. So kudos to the defense. They showed up big time. Defensive line, I thought, in a big way. But the Cougs, Bump, they found a way to lose at the end again, and it's those late game struggles. They're just not, they can't find a way to finish games. What do you think for Washington State that was in those 3 games?
Yeah, I think when you allow an offense to get going in the previous 2 games, that's always going to apply some pressure. That means that both sides have to be damn near perfect in pressure situations. In this, I think there's just no flow. You got your defense playing great. You mentioned the sacks from this defensive line, the turnovers. You have to get points off of turnovers. It's the play calling, it's the execution. It just never felt like they found their rhythm in these past few games. Even though you look at the scoreboard in these other games, you see the points. It never felt like they had enough towards the end of the games, enough juice and efficiency towards the end of the game to kind of cap it off, man. It just comes down to you're tired, the play calling, the execution, all the stuff that we prepare for in the summertime when you're running gassers and trying to make sure you're mentally ready to go. Unfortunately, it's always a group effort when you lose ball games like that.
For sure. And, you kind of mentioned how the units have to play together. And, definitely the defense didn't play their best the 2 weeks prior. But if you remember back to New Mexico, Bump, the second half against New Mexico, Cougs only scored 7 points. They scored 28 points in the first half, and then it was kind of like the offense disappeared again. They scored the touchdown late to go, to take the lead, but not productive at all in the second half there. Against Oregon State, they were much better, but they still had some empty possessions in key moments, including after a turnover by Ethan O'Connor when he got that interception, remember? They get 0 points out of that. And then you follow that up with Wyoming with a 14-point performance against a team giving up nearly 30 points per game. I think there were actually some key moments where the offense disappeared and did not help the defense and didn't show up and play complementary football. And I go back to some of that with part of its execution, but part of it's play calling, right? You got to give your guys the chance to be successful. Guys like Wayshawn Parker have got to have more touches. We talked about Kyle Williams, and I think some of that lack of consistency led to the lack of production. So definitely saw that down the stretch. And with all that being said, Cougs don't necessarily have to worry about that anymore because they got two guys that are out the door. That's offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle and defensive coordinator Jeff Schmedding for different reasons. We'll talk about it when we come back.
This segment is presented by Cougs First. Think Cougs First for products, services, and hiring.
Welcome back to Talkin Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus with Alex Brink. There's been some changes on the Palouse. Man, the guys calling the plays, the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator Arbuckle on the O, Schmedding on the defense are gone. Two different reasons. Arbuckle takes a job in Oklahoma. Let's start there, B. You feel like he was ascending at a high level. A few years ago, he was driving for Uber Eats, delivering food. Then he gets an opportunity in Western Kentucky, comes over to the West with Pullman and the Cougs, and now he's going to the Midwest, Oklahoma. Your initial reactions, what did you think when you heard this go down?
Hey, I'm happy for him, man. The coaching's a really hard profession, right? So when you get opportunities and opportunities to change your life financially and get big opportunities at big jobs, you obviously have to take it. Right. And so to your point about kind of what he's done along the way, had a lot of success at Western Kentucky. You know, he came to Washington State. I think it was mixed results at times, but he definitely found lightning in a bottle with John Mateer this year. And I think that really helped his case, right? Anytime you have a quarterback that's as dynamic as Mateer, it makes you look really good. And so as a young coordinator, right, he's not even 30 years old, you know, he's still kind of growing and learning, and you saw that throughout the year. But, you know, he's going to get a chance to go and kind of put his mark on that Sooner football team, and that's a very high-profile job. There's going to be a lot of eyes on it, more eyes than were on him at Washington State. I'll be interested to see how he handled that. But, you know, it's an opportunity for Washington State and Jake Dickert to kind of remake what they want in this offense. And they're going to have to figure out how the quarterback position plays out, right? We don't know what the situation will be with John Mateer specifically. There's some players on that offense that may have opportunities like Wayshawn Parker. You know, people are reaching out to guys on that two deep for sure, but there's a lot of playmakers. The question I ask, Bump, is, you know, where do you go? This has been an air raid team for the most part since Mike Leach took over, right? You had a 2-year window with the run and shoot with Nick Rolovich and Craig Stutzman, and then you bring in Eric Morris followed by Ben Arbuckle, who were Leach disciples running the air raid. And I think the question is, you know, can you run the air raid if it's not in its purest form, right? Like Mike Leach ran it? Because Eric Morris and Ben Arbuckle both, again, had their inconsistencies. Those offenses didn't always perform when you needed them most. We talked about that last segment, and Jake Dickert talked a lot about, you know, the ability for this team to run the football. And so do you find somebody who now, you know, there's a lot of offenses, Bump, nowadays that are spread offenses that are not air raid, right? That throw the football a lot, but have more balance in the run game. I think a lot about the NFL model, right? You watch a ton of NFL tape, and that NFL model of, you know, Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Mike McDaniel, they're throwing the football all over the yard, but they have a ton of balance in the running game. And so there's versions of that at the college level. You can also go the air raid route. I think you have to have the ability to pass the football at a high level because that's just where the game is these days. And you have a great quarterback. But I do think you can get out of the air raid tree if you want to and maybe remake the offensive identity.
Yeah, balance is always key, right? You want to be able to run the football. We saw something we haven't seen in a while this year with the tight end getting more involved in the pass game, or even having a tight end in general. But balance is key. But I think you're on to something. On offense, it's about deception, right? You are trying to fool the defense. You are trying to out-leverage the defense. You're trying to put them in compromising situations. How do you do that? With your shifts, with your motions, with your layers when it comes to your route combinations. The only thing I think that makes it hard to create true balance at a school like Washington State is you have to be able to recruit those type of players, right? You have a guy like Parker in the backfield who we felt like should have probably gotten the ball a bit more, but maybe they don't believe in the offensive line and their abilities to create these gaps or whatnot. It's about who you're able to get to the Palouse. I think that kind of determines what type of offense you're capable of running because your personnel controls everything. But I like it. More under center, some play action. Play action hits at a high level when you are under center, when you can influence the defense, show that deception. Obviously, throwing out a shotgun and doing the RPO stuff is good as well. So it's more about being multiple, right? We hear that word used all the time when it comes to coaching and offense and defenses, but it's about being multiple. We'll see what they can recruit. I mean, you're going to be up there for signing day. We'll see what that looks like. Your personnel controls everything. I'm all with the balance. Keep the tight end involved. Run the dang football. Packing in motions and shifts. Make it look more like the pro game, and I think you have a chance.
I totally agree. I mean, think back to our day, Bump. Talk about tight ends. We had a great one in Jed Collins. We played with a couple other fantastic ones in Troy Benjamin, Cody Boyd. You can find big athletic bodies to play tight end. I mean, I think that's not a position that of strength you could actually recruit to the Palouse if they were more involved. And again, that gets you back into a little bit of that under center running game, play action pass. I think you can still throw out of that and be really dynamic, but in a way, to your point, it gives you more balance. That being said, if you run the football more, Bump, it might help out the defense, which is going to need to find somebody else to call the plays. With Jeff Schmedding getting fired by Jake Dickert this week, that defense, Bump, we talked about it. They had their moments where they were pretty good, and then they had some moments in key games where they just didn't show up. And I think there was an element of, we talked about coming into the season, they lost 3 players to the NFL draft, 2 other ones that are on NFL rosters. So you lost a ton of talent. They tried to kind of backfill that talent. And maybe it hit, maybe it didn't. Maybe there were scheme issues. In the end, the defense gave up nearly 30 points per game, and down the back half of the season really struggled at times. And it feels like defensively, Jake Dickert's a defensive head coach. So he knows what he wants out of that unit. The question is, can he find a coordinator that aligns with him on that? And can they get the players right to fit the scheme and execute the way they need to execute?
Yeah, Dickert is, if there's anything that hurt him the most this year, emotionally, it has to be watching that defense give up all the yards on the ground and some of those big plays, even though they did have their moments as well where they looked good. I think this is where Dickert shines. This is where he finds exactly what he is looking for. He's been the head coach in the Palouse for a while now. He understands how this works. He knows what type of players he's able to get. This is where he has to go to work. I think Schmedding in that defense, like you mentioned, had some good moments. The Utah States, the Hawaiis, even against San Jose State, where you give up a bunch of points, but you come through late, clutch with a big play to kind of seal that thing. It's all about philosophy. Can you get a guy that shares the same philosophy and that can run his stuff? Because when it's all said and done, he is the head coach. He has the final say, but we know that his strength is on the defensive side of the football. So, well, yeah, there's change in the Palouse, man, and change can be good sometimes, especially when you go on a 3-game skid to kind of cap off a season that was this close to being special. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, that change, it's a lot of it. And there's more coming, I'm sure, with signing day coming up and NIL, transfer portal, all the things that is now the reality of the offseason in college football. And we're going to find out. I think there's some opportunity for growth for this Washington State football team. And you mentioned a really important piece at the beginning. This is an 8-win football team with a chance to go to 9 when they go to a good bowl game here later in December. This is, in the end, as hard as the last few weeks were, I think was a quality season that they can build off of. And part of that will be finding the right guys to call plays on offense and defense. So it's a big ask. It's part of the job for Coach Dickert. We'll be interested to see who they come up with. When we come back, we're going to be joined by my friend and Bump's friend and our sideline analyst for the Washington State radio broadcast, Jessamine McIntyre, to break down everything that's happening in Washington State football right now.
This segment is brought to you by Cougar Collective.
Back now on Talkin Cougars, and I am super excited to be joined by my good friend, Jessamine McIntyre, an executive producer at 950 KJR in Seattle. I get to join her every week with Ian Furness to talk some Cougar football. She is, more importantly, the sideline analyst for the Washington State radio broadcast with myself and Chris King. Jess, you've been doing that a long time at Washington State. How long has it been? And, talk a little bit about that role and what it means to you.
Well, it's the favorite thing that I do. Just don't tell my bosses here at KJR because can't let them in on that secret. But this just wraps up my 13th season with the team. And I obviously started when I was like 12. So, wonderkin over here. But no, after 13 seasons, I started in 2012, Mike Leach's first year. And I watched this program grow and grow. And then we had the COVID year. We had tragedies over in Pullman. We had a lot that this team has gone through. Then we had the dissipation of the Pac-12, which was a blow to everyone. And I've watched them climb from the ashes every single time. And, just this season overall, I feel like was a huge letdown. And one of the things that, you look at an 8-4 season, that's not the letdown. It's the way that it ended and the fashion in which it did. So this was the big chance for the Cougs to put themselves on the national stage, which they did throughout the majority of the season leading up until the final quarter of it. And it just petered out. And now it's going to be very, very difficult to rebuild that momentum for the entire program.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Bump and I talked about that very thing a lot, about how, the team really got off to that hot start, had a lot going for it. These last 3 weeks have been really tough, and they got tougher, right? And you're kind of uniquely experienced to talk on this because you've been with the program so long. You've seen a lot of changes in the coaching staff and at the coordinator position, whether it's, obviously Nick Rolovich at the, Mike Leach, Nick Rolovich. You had Alex Grinch as a defensive coordinator. You had Eric Morris as an offensive coordinator. I could go on and on, but we found out this week that Ben Arbuckle's heading off to Oklahoma. We found out that defensive coordinator Jeff Schmedding got fired, and now there is that element of how does the team and how does Jake Dickert kind of pick up the pieces and rebuild from here? In your experience and kind of watching these things play out, just in general, what is the process going to be like for finding those coordinators, for Coach Dickert, and ultimately the athletes getting in and experiencing the new coaches?
I think it's going to be difficult, to be honest, especially because of a lot of what I just talked about with the lack of momentum surrounding the program in general. I think John Mateer will be a huge piece to that, should he stay and hopefully stay with the Cougs, because that's an attractive talent to come into. You're losing Kyle Williams, who arguably is the best offensive player outside the quarterback position on that team. He's graduating. He's moving on to Sundays, and I can't wait to watch him. But I think John Mateer will be key in that. The thing that Jake Dickert lacks, and it's not a fault of his own, it's because he's young. He's 41 years old, and he's a relatively new head coach, as he doesn't have this toy chest of a coaching tree to go into the way that your Mike Leach has had. Even Nick Rolovich had more experience when it came to that. He doesn't have a crew. He's building that crew. And through his success, they are spreading their wings and heading to greener pastures. I honestly think Ben Arbuckle has this wonderkin label on him right now. I think he probably needs a little more experience. I think he's going to have an Alex Grinch type of run, to be honest. I don't wish that for him, but we saw what happened there. It's someone gets hot at a young age and they're a shiny object, and they don't have that experience, and also they don't have that tree to build a surrounding staff. I don't know how much say he'll have in who he builds around him in Oklahoma, but it's not going to be easy. And I mean, there was a coach opening there for a reason. So he is not going into the easiest situation. I think Jake Dickert is going to have to go young, or he's going to have to get creative. He's going to have to go through people that perhaps have connections at smaller schools. He's going to have to find an up-and-comer, and that's just what happens in these situations.
Well, when we come back, we're going to keep Jess a little bit longer. We got to pick her brain on, where the team goes from here, a bowl game, and what next season might look like. We'll be back on Talkin' Cougars.
This segment is brought to you by Flat Stick Pub, local craft beer, mini golf, and old school fun.
All right, back now on Talkin' Cougars, and we still have Jessamine McIntyre with us. our sideline analyst on the Cougar football radio broadcast with Chris King and myself. Jessamine has been with the team for 13 years. She's seen all walks of it, from Mike Leach to Nick Rolovich, bowl games, not bowl games, COVID season. We've been through it for 8 of those seasons, and very excited to have you back again here. Jess, this team finished 8-4 in the regular season, obviously finished on a 3-game slide. You talked a little bit about those challenges, but it's an 8-win football team with a chance to go to probably a pretty good bowl game here later in December and a chance to get 9 wins. What does that part of the season, the chance to go to bowl game and 9 wins, mean for this team?
Well, it depends on who's playing in it, to be honest, because for me, especially after watching senior day last weekend, senior night, I should say, senior afternoon, it was a 3:45 kick. But anyway, I think it means a last chance to play with your brothers. And a lot of people take that very seriously. And it is something that we're seeing wean its way out of college football with the transfer portal, NIL. Guys just aren't staying together as long as they usually do, especially in success, because there's always a greener pasture and a bigger wallet these days. And that's just it. I'm not blaming anyone. This is a chance to spend sometimes one final, well, not just the bowl game, but a final month. You're still going through practices. You're still going through your regular routine. It's another month that coaches get with their players, especially those that are staying within the program. So it's not just about the one last chance for the seniors and those who are leaving to play together. It is a chance for these coaches to work on the future of the team that they still have and that they will retain there. Plus, when it comes to the bowl game, it's one last chance to show on a national scale what Washington State can do.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And it's, like you said, an opportunity to get better. And a lot of young guys are probably going to get time to play, which will be, I think in the end also really important. Jess, fast forward in and out, right? There's a lot that's going to happen in the next month or two. There's no doubt about that. But, the schedule's set for 2025. We know there's a Pac-12 rebirth happening in 2026. Looking out ahead for Washington State football, what do you see? What do you see coming in 2025 and then ultimately with that new Pac-12 arrangement?
I look at the schedule ahead of next year, and it's a little funky, but there are a couple of really good opportunities to make statements. And I look at Ole Miss being on our schedule. That is huge. That is an absolutely huge one. Unfortunately, it's back-to-back road games, which do give us a good chance because JMU is the other one, which is a big road trip. Those do happen on back-to-back weeks, but those will be heavily watched, heavily consumed, and those are chances to make statements. And I think there is a double-edged sword there. So while you have the chance to make a statement, well, you better make one because those are going to be tough. JMU, I know that everybody kind of gives them a reputation of being a smaller school. They're one of the best schools during their FCS time that we've seen in the country. They are extremely talented and they are extremely loyal when it comes to the fan base. That is going to be a very tough environment to play in. Ole Miss, that's a big one. That is going to be huge. So looking ahead of that, I see opportunities.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And you still got the Apple Cup on the schedule in September in Pullman, so a chance to beat the Dogs. And like you said, there's 2 or 3, 4 opportunities to make a statement. And then other than that, you just got to win, which makes it no different than what you hoped it was going to be this year, which is win and win a lot. And Cougs started that way and couldn't finish, but feels like it could be similar in that sense. And I agree, the double-edged sword of playing some big-time road games, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. What about the Pac-12 as it's being reborn here with some Mountain West schools, Gonzaga, not finished yet, right? Still need another full member to come in. As you think about 2026 and the Pac-12 for Washington State and what that can be.
I mean, I think it's great. I think we were off to a great start. I love that it was all state schools that came in from the football perspective. For some reason, that just let's make it the state conference. Let's make it the Pac State. But obviously, we need to leave that open for other schools to join. I really do think that eventually, I know I talked about self-correction earlier, but I do think that eventually we're going to see that the way we had it was actually the better way to do things. And I know the dollar speaks, but the dollars will be there. The future of what this conference can be, I look at it as Washington State and Oregon State kind of being the tide that rises all ships. Instead of, it would have been looked at probably in a negative way if Washington State and Oregon State went to the Mountain West, for instance. I think that these teams, the state schools that are joining the Pac-12, we're going to elevate the talent that is, capable, that they're capable of recruiting. I think we're going to elevate the coaching. I think it makes it more those jobs, and this is no offense to the Mountain West, but I do think it makes those coaching opportunities more attractive. And that's just a fact across the country. We're trying to build back into the Power Five. And once we're there, I think you'll see both coaching and athletic talent join.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. I couldn't agree more. I'm now everybody knows I'm a West Coast college football purist, so I want the Pac to exist, and I'm excited about the future there. Well, Jess, I sure appreciate you jumping on with Bump and I here on Talkin' Cougars. No game for us this weekend, so we get to sit and watch some ball. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I missed you already, man. It's only been like 3 days, but thanks for having me.
We'll be back next on Talkin' Cougars.
This segment is brought to you by Valley GMC. See you in the Valley.
Back now on Talking Cougars and Bump, we got to talk a little bit about what it is like for these players and coaches as they prepare for a bowl game. We don't know where the Cougs are going to be going quite yet, but we do know that they will be playing in a bowl game, and a good one. I was in Pullman, and representatives from the Holiday Bowl were there, and they were excited about Cougs, potentially going to San Diego. Now, the loss didn't necessarily help, and there will be some decisions that have to be made. But, between the Holiday Bowl and the Vegas Bowl, most likely, those are a couple opportunities and destinations that Coug fans will like and the players will like. But it's a long way. I mean, that's from now, the first week of December, till after Christmas for both of those. What is the team going to do in the lead up to preparing for those games?
Man, one is about just regrouping. There's been a lot of change here in the last day or two when it comes to the staff on the personnel. So I think Dicker's responsibility is to kind of align things, put people in place, let these guys know this is how we are going to move forward as a program, as an organization. Now, when it comes to the players, it's about maintenance. You have to give these guys a few days off, let the body rest. But then it's the strength and conditioning coaches that are responsible for kind of building these bodies back up in a way that's going to allow them to peak at the right moment and get ready for this bowl game. Now you just wait. You're just sharpening your tools at this point. You don't know who you're going to play necessarily. You might have an idea of matchups and possibilities. You might gather some film and just take a peek at some guys. But quarterbacks, receivers got to get together, make sure their timing is on point. Offensive linemen get together, make sure that your communication is on point. And same thing with the defense. It's such a great area that they're in right now with all the change with the coordinators and not knowing who you're going to play. It's more about focusing on you. What can I do to get better as a person, no matter who I'm playing, no matter who we're going up against? What can I do as a football player to make sure my mind and my body is ready to go? But most importantly, it's about organizing the staff. Who's going to do what, who has what responsibilities, and communicating that clearly with your players.
Well, and the communication, right, is going to happen at the position coach level, because you mentioned the coordinators are gone. And that's where I think Washington State has an advantage because of how strong their individual position coaches are. I think about guys like Pete Caligas, the defensive line coach, right, who's at Wyoming forever. He's been at Washington State and has a great relationship with his group. Jordan Malone, the safeties coach, and then on offense, Nick Edwards, the wide receivers coach, and Mark Atuaya, the running back coach, right? You got all the guys, all the position coaches are going to be really one-to-one working with those players, focusing on the young guys, especially in a lot of those practices. But then, like you said, sharpen the tools of the veterans, and most importantly, communicating with them, talking about what's going on, talking about what they're hearing, helping them through this time. Because as players, there is a lot of uncertainty because you don't necessarily know. You don't sit in on the meetings, right? You don't sit in on who they're talking about, say for coordinators, or know much about that. And so having those position coaches be able to really communicate effectively, I think will be a big part of it. The other big part, Bump, you and I didn't get to experience, really nobody has to this point, is they didn't get to experience a brand new indoor facility. My freshman year, we practiced in that air-supported structure, the bubble. That was a tough place to hold those bowl practices, not the best practice environment. But boy, that new Taylor Sports Complex is beautiful to have a true indoor facility in the winter while you're preparing for a bowl game.
Yeah, that's crucial, man. The lighting is good. We remember practicing in the bubble. The lighting was all jacked up. The AstroTurf jacked your knees up. No, they will be practicing in some luxury, but that's nice though, because it just makes the practice plan run smoother. The execution is smoother. It's just a good situation for those guys, man. So big ups to the university for getting that done just in time, because it's cold over here. I'm on the west side. It's cold over here. So I can even imagine looking at Beasley, seeing what the temperature is as you're walking to class or whatnot. So yeah, that's a great point, man. They are equipped for this moment. They're equipped to have this layoff, to get the body right, get the mind right, and practice in a facility that's made for moments like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, from the coach's standpoint, it's all about recruiting, right? They got signing day this week for the young high school kids, getting them signed. Then they're looking in the portal. They're trying to figure out who's available. Who can they go get? I saw a stat already, Bump. There's, 1,500 kids in the portal already, and the season's not even over yet or something like that. So there's going to be athletes out there, and they're evaluating that along with the high school talent that they were able to sign. And that's really where the focus is, I think, of the coaches, is maintaining your roster. We know how important that is with the guys that are on there, but then also figuring out who you can build onto your roster, maybe through the transfer portal. So it's going to be a busy, busy month of December.
It's a chess match. They got their hands full, man, but we'll see exactly how they do. And when we come back, man, we'll break down some of these conference championship games. Which ones are we looking forward to? That's next here on Talkin' Cougars. We are back. This is Talkin' Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpers with Alex Brink. It's time to go across the country and look at some of these conference championship games, man. It is going down. We got a bunch of matchups. We got UNLV Boise. You got Iowa versus Iowa State ASU, Georgia, Texas, Penn, Oregon, and then Clemson, SMU. Which games are you looking forward to seeing, B?
I'm looking forward to seeing all of them. This is great football. With the 12-team college football playoff, all of these conference championships have a level of importance. And there's a couple that stand out to me. One of them being that Mountain West championship with UNLV and Boise State. I mean, talk about two teams that are playing fantastic this year. Boise State obviously has been the darling of college football with Ashton Genty, the Heisman Trophy, one of the Heisman Trophy candidates, maybe leader in the clubhouse. They felt like a foregone conclusion, right, to make it in the playoff. But the crazy part with these conference championships is if UNLV wins, they're probably getting in, right? Yeah. And Boise, for a team like Boise has played so well all year, how heartbreaking would it be if you couldn't finish that part of it off? Now, they get them at home in Boise. UNLV and Barry Odom are really well coached. They've got a really good defense, unique on offense. It's a tough matchup. I think it's going to be a fantastic football game. I'm really excited to see that one. I'm also excited to see Arizona State and Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. Iowa State's been solid all year. They had a hiccup, 2 back-to-back losses in the middle of the year. Felt like it knocked them out of it a little bit. Then they come back and play great the back half of the season. But boy, Arizona State is trending like this. Cam Scadaboo, probably the next best running back behind Ashton Genty in the country. So productive. He's the key of that offense. Young quarterback Sam Levitt, who I know really well from Westland, Oregon, right here in my neck of the woods, is playing great. The defense has showed up, and they're playing their best football. They hung 49 points on Arizona in the rivalry game last week. I think Arizona State's going to come out and get after Iowa State. Just feels like the Sun Devils are playing some really, really good football.
Man, it's crazy. The Pac-12 went to the Big 10 and Big 12 and pretty much claimed it as their own, with Oregon and Arizona State getting into the conference championship games. But I'm looking at the ACC, and this one intrigues me because Clemson was thought to be done. They're not going to make the ACC championship game. You're not going to the college football playoffs. And then what happens? My guy Alex Brink called this last week. He said, listen, Miami is going to lose to Syracuse, and that's going to open up the door for Clemson. That's exactly what happened. A team that doesn't want to do NIL, that hates going to the transfer portal, is jacking up the system and saying, I'm going to do it my way, and Dabo Swinney going up against SMU, a team that's doing it that way, buying their players, great NIL deals. I just like all the drama. They got a quarterback over there in Clemson, Klubnik, who does it with his arm and does it with his feet as well. I just like the drama that's in this because it's almost like Dabo's being, everything's justified. The way he does things, why he doesn't like things, are justified. Eventually, he's going to have to buy into the way college football is if he really wants to keep up with everyone else. But I just like the contrast. SMU, we're going to buy everybody. Clemson, of course, they're paying their players, but they don't want to do it at the rate that other schools are doing it. I love the drama. The ACC is wide open. Miami helped out Syracuse by losing, or helped out Clemson by losing to Syracuse, and it makes for some good drama.
Yeah, how about that Big Ten championship instead of the Oregon-Ohio State rematch with Michigan taking down the Buckeyes? We get a Penn State-Oregon matchup. Not sure that one's going to end well for the Nittany Lions, but we'll see. Again, anything can happen on any given weekend, as we know, and it's been a wild college football season so far. When we come back, put a bow on this one, we'll wrap it up, talk a little bit about where Washington State goes from here. Back now on Talkin' Cougars. I'm Alex Brink, joined by Michael Bumpus. We're going to wrap this one up, Bump, and we're going to talk about just where does the team go from here? What is the focus over the next few weeks heading into the bowl game? For me, it's got to be all about roster retention. This day and age, transfer portal and all the things, when you end this season on a 3-game losing skid, and it's obviously a harder situation in a locker room, in the building, both for coaches and players, because of the frustration you experience. And so that means coaches got their work cut out for them, retaining the roster. The players, right, have to rally together. And I think this team, right, you look at the roster and the youth bump on the roster. If this whole group comes back, they have a chance to do something really special again next year. Maybe learn from the lessons of the last 3 weeks, build off of it, and go and be the Boise State, right, of the season next year because of the youth. You think John Mateer, a sophomore quarterback, Wayshawn Parker, a freshman running back, your whole offensive line would come back. Buda Alukta on defense is a sophomore. You got Ansel Dimbu and Khalil Laufau are sophomores at defensive tackle. David Gust is a junior. He already mentioned he would be coming back. So again, you have a lot of pieces that you can bring back on this team.
I think that's key. You got to bring them back because, as we know, there's something called the transfer portal that is like free agency for these college kids. So you have to create some value that makes them want to come back. And I think Dickert has done that. I know you look at the way the season ended and you say, why would they want to come back 3-game skid? But if you've been around the Palouse, you've been around Coach Dickert in that program, you know that there's something special over there. It's deeper than just winning football games. You, of course, are in the winning business. Let's not get it wrong. But there's a coach there that I think kids are buying into. That's why you hear guys saying, look, I'm coming back next year. But the higher profile guys, like some of the ones you just mentioned, they have to make tough decisions. So now it's up to Dickert in the game to reel them in, make them realize why they came to Wazoo, and hopefully they stick around. But we're not sticking around, man. We are done for the day. I'm Michael Bumpus. You can find me on Instagram, Michael Bumpus5, on X, Michael Bumpus5. This weekend, I'm on the Seahawks broadcast, and then Bump and Stacy, Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 p.m. on Seattle Sports.
And I'm Alex Brink. You find me on X at AlexBrink10. No football game this weekend for me, so I will not be on the broadcast. I'm going to be watching those conference championship games from the comfort of my couch, Bump. I'm looking forward to it. We will be back in a few weeks in the lead up to the bowl game for Washington State. We'll be able to talk all things transfer portal, NIL, and signing day. We're excited for that. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for joining Talkin' Cougars.